Okay, well, I hope you're all still out there. It's 10 minutes after the hour, so we will get going again. I still have some more material I want to get covered this evening, so I'm going to keep things moving along. We were just looking at a map of Wheaton, and I was talking about minimum lot sizes and some of the characteristics of zoning. And more recently, as I say on the slide here, cities are beginning to reconsider single-family zoning. Why are places rethinking zoning? Well, they're rethinking zoning for a number of reasons. Number one would be, probably the biggest reason would be affordability, density, diversity, segregation. Right? We have a system that has people building buildings on large lots. It makes it hard to increase the supply of housing to make housing more affordable. We've spent a lot of time talking about how density is a desirable attribute, right? Density makes cities and towns more sustainable. So originally, single-family zoning was meant to, quote unquote, protect the neighborhoods of homes from dense commercial development. And that single-family home in the suburbs, right, that we just saw in Wheaton, has been the American ideal for maybe the last 50 or 60 years since the end of World War II. So what are some of the issues? Well, obviously the biggest issue would be affordability, right? If every house has to be big and on a big lot, then how can people afford to buy houses like that? Inequity is an issue, as is climate change. So if we want to address some of these issues, we might have to look at how towns and cities are zoned. And things that are talked about in the political process, not everyone is going to be in favor of this, right? You might say it's going to change the character of my neighborhood, might bring in some undesirable people or lower my property values.
Yes, we're getting a little racy, aren't we?
Yes, we are getting a little bit racy here. Yes, that is correct. So again, this is kind of a standby, right? When I'll see if I can find this article and post it. You see, this is about a year or so ago. This stuff was being talked about. I think Minneapolis was the example of it, where they were thinking of rezoning the city. And obviously, in the last couple of months, Minneapolis has had lots of other stuff going on. So this particular idea may have been shelved. But again, this was, some of these cities were thinking about how to address these issues, right? Affordability and racial issues and climate change, right? One way of addressing those issues is making lots smaller and increasing density. Yes.
Outside. I got a little carried away, forgot the mic was on for a bit.
Okay, so what I wanted to do was, I thought about just, again, looking at our city and kind of going back to our green is lower driving costs, red is higher driving costs, see what that actually means, right? In Lincoln Park, right, it's fairly dense. You have lots of public transportation options, lots of different ways of getting around other than driving in an automobile. As a matter of fact, if you live in Lincoln Park, chances are you wouldn't want to own an automobile because there's either no place to park or it's going to cost you $50 or $100 a month to park your car. So there's a disincentive to own an automobile in a place like this. Right, you get out to where I live in Oak Park, you see we're starting to make a transition. Right, the driving costs are getting to be a little bit higher. right? Especially in North Oak Park, where you're a little far away from the green line here, right? Here's the green line and the Metro line, and here's the blue line. But we still have, we still have the CTA, the Metro. We have car sharing stations near some of our L stops. Elmhurst, again, you see driving costs getting a little bit higher, except maybe in the center of Elmhurst where you're near the Metro station. So theoretically, you could live in the center of Elmhurst. The center of Elmhurst is fairly walkable. You can live in the center of Elmhurst and walk to the Metro station and take the Metro downtown.
Yeah. A couple buses here and there.
Correct.
You got the one at the south. You got one at the south end of town that takes you to Oak Brook on daily.
Hey, I'm gonna have to. You're a transit aficionado here, Brenna. I'm gonna have to keep that in mind here. You're gonna know where all the bus lines are.
Yeah, I'm not a bit rusty because obviously because of this whole bullshit, like this whole bull. I am to get back on the bus soon.
Yes, you're probably. Yeah, I noticed the Pace bus. Pace must have bought a lot of brand new buses, and I see their brand new buses driving around with nobody on them. So hopefully that'll change again.
Yeah,
so again, as you move further out, again, you're seeing the colors change from the greens and yellows to the reds. Right. Again, in Naperville, there is a nice central city area in Naperville near the Metro station where there is walkability and there is commercial development, but very quickly you get away from that and you have to get in your car to drive anywhere. And then further out, Elburn, right? That's a outer ring suburb, and you pretty much can't do anything without getting in your car.
Yeah, that's where my.
So why might you be, if you're out looking for a house, why might you be looking for a house in Elburn, right? Elburn, you might be looking for a house because you drive till you qualify, right? As you get further and further out from the center city, then housing prices tend to go down. And when the banker looks at your income statement, they're going to say, oh, you make such and such amount of money, so you can afford a house that costs this much. So if you're shopping for a house, you're probably going to go and get pre-qualified, and then you're going to say, oh, I can afford a house that's $300,000, and you start shopping for a house, and oops, I can't afford to live in Elmhurst, and oops, I can't afford to live in Naperville. Right, I'm going to have to look in Elburn. Right, so to find quote unquote affordable housing, families will often look to the outer ring suburbs. Right, Elburn is an outer ring suburb.
Yeah, there's also where Grandpa's a-hole brother lives.
Yes, it's a long way away. Now, unfortunately, when you're driving further and further out to find a house that you can afford, you've neglected to think of the transportation costs, right? Because now you have to own a car, and it's going to cost you more, and there's no walkability, so you're going to have to drive to get anywhere. So in this particular case, folks have said we should not be looking just at housing costs. We should be looking at H&T, or housing and transportation costs. So in some cases, if we spend more on the H part and lower the T part, we might be better off. In many cases, living closer to the city center with higher cost housing produces a lower H&T, right? Maybe you're better off living in Elmhurst or in Oak Park. Housing is more expensive, but transportation costs are going to be lower. Let's talk a little bit about a planning concept called transit-oriented development. again, in the interests of driving towards density and mixed uses, planners have started to reimagine or maybe revisit the way that cities like Chicago were laid out in the first place, right? Back to the Future, this is how Chicagoland initially developed, right? Transit-oriented development is really meant to encourage transit ridership and discourage or dissuade the ownership of automobiles.
Going back to the days of like the surface line, the old
Yeah, well, yeah, we'll see it. We'll see something here in a second, Bryn. You're stealing my thunder. But yes, we're going back to the Chicago as the streetcar city, right? It's back to the future, right? In transit-oriented development, we're kind of building around a neighborhood center that's built around a transit stop, you know, a train station, a metro station, and surrounded by relatively high density development with progressively lower density development spreading outward from the center. So again, this might be a little bit like what the center of Elmhurst looks like. Is probably a good example, right? You have, again, the metro stop at Elmhurst, and you have apartments right nearby and lots of stores and shops. So that would be, you could consider the center of Elmhurst as a good picture of what transit-oriented development would look like. The key thing about transit-oriented development is that we're trying to keep things to a quarter to a half a mile, right? This is kind of considered as far as someone is generally going to want to walk, the appropriate scale for pedestrians, thus solving the last mile problem, right? We have Amazon has a last mile problem, right? And so do people who lay out towns and cities, right? If the train station is more than, say, a half mile from your house, you're likely not going to want to walk there, right? You're going to want to get in your car, and as soon as you get in your car, then we've kind of gotten away from the whole point of dense development, right? So, as I was alluding to, right, Chicago is already transit oriented, right? This is the way that our city developed.
Yeah, a lot of the bus lines are all from the streetcars.
That's correct. A grid of commercial streets and bus lines at half-mile intervals, right? You look at, you know, going north, you have Chicago Division, North Avenue, Armitage, Fullerton, Diversey, right? Each of these bus lines are half a mile away from each other. So, for whatever reason, when we laid out, when Chicago was laid out in the late 19th and early 20th century, it was laid out in a fashion that's very close to what people are now starting to rediscover with transit-oriented development. And also, again, in right, if you want to get to the Fullerton Avenue stop on the brown and red lines, right? This Fullerton Avenue bus is probably running fairly frequently, so it's more likely that you're going to jump on the bus than get in a car because that bus is coming by every 5 or 10 minutes. Right? We're trying to mimic the same thing. So why are folks thinking about transit-oriented development? Right? They're thinking about traffic congestion. They don't really like necessarily the separation of uses that we saw. They're people thinking about a more urban lifestyle, and they're obviously thinking about sustainability. What are some of the components of transit-oriented development? It's really a walkable design with the pedestrian as the highest priority, right? For a long time, we've designed cities and towns around the automobile, and now we're flipping that back around and making the pedestrian be the highest priority again, and building around train station with a public square, mixture of uses, high density walkable around the train station. And again, we're trying to do things to encourage the pedestrian and discourage automobiles, right? We might have less availability of parking in that area that's right nearby the city center. And obviously, benefits of TOD would be that we reduce. This particular study is looking at a particular region, VMT, vehicle miles traveled. Right, so obviously, if we have an area with good transit and mixed land use, less vehicles are owned, and people drive less. Residents of transit-oriented developments or places like the city of Chicago, closer in, Lincoln Park, tend to own fewer vehicles, drive less, and rely more on alternate modes than in more automobile-oriented communities. I don't know why walking would be an alternate mode, but I guess walking is considered an alternate mode of transportation. You know, walking to me seems fairly normal and natural, but it's considered an alternative. And we're going to watch something on YouTube here.
And today, where are we in the continuum? Is this an ebb and flow? Are we coming back and forth into an idea, an ethic, a philosophy that we've had?
Yeah, I think we're returning to some timeless qualities. You know, we took a little detour after World War II. We were wealthier than any other middle class in the history of mankind, and we had a new technology that everybody was in love with, and we subsidized it with highway investments and with GI bills, and we got sprawl. You know, 2008 crash was about people not being able to afford to drive that far to have that size yard. But simultaneously, you know, the demographics have shifted. It's not that everybody's going to move back to the city. That's a little bit of a misnomer that people get very excited about. So we've got to rethink the way we build our cities. It can't be this one-size-fits-all paradigm that we've had for so long.
So what are the best kind of cities or towns that you've seen around the country, and how they're coping with different kind of climate-related problems, or as they think about and redesign this, what kind of yields have they gotten back?
Well, the signature, of course, is Portland, and everybody discounts Portland. I don't know why. You know, Portland was a complete dump in the 60s and 70s. I mean, nobody wanted to be in Portland. The downtown was horrible. But they basically, through great design and by shifting from cars and highways to transit, there was a seminal moment in 1990 where they decided to build the West Side Light Rail line and put, you know, like a string of pearls along it, a series of neighborhoods that were walkable, instead of a new Beltway freeway. Same dollars, just shifted to a whole nother system, not only of transportation, but of living. Complete success story. So by 96, the average vehicle miles traveled per household in Portland has dropped, whereas the average in America has continued to rise. So we become more and more auto-dependent with all the negative attributes that brings. But Portland is kind of a case study and a proof. It's a laboratory that says, yeah, this really works.
The urban heat islands that we see in big cities, how significant is it when we have density without planning, in the sense that without having perhaps green roofs or enough open space, et cetera, et cetera?
You know, it's ironic because one of the first places I worked in my life was Sacramento, and the reverse was true. Downtown Sacramento, which had these beautiful canopies over the streets, was on average 10 degrees cooler in the summer than the suburbs, which didn't have mature trees and were more spread out. And so actually, it's not always the case that you get this heat island effect. And that goes to the key issue here. The moment you create great walkable streets, and believe me, street trees are always a central piece of that. You can't have a great street without great street trees. You solve a lot of that problem right then and there. Street trees, it's that simple. And yeah, you can do white roofs and green roofs, and you know there are other mitigating factors. But believe me, it's that street canopy that makes all the difference.
If I don't want to make a video like this of myself, I can just make a really cute one of a caricature with me.
Hi, I'm Brad Callen, and in this video, I'm going to show you how anyone can quickly and
Okay. Actually, I have a couple. I'll give you the links to a couple things that were similar to that, variations on the same theme, but since our time is running a little short, let me get back to my slide where I was. Right, so a couple links here you can watch, and I'll put these up as in a .doc where you can just click on them directly, but basically kind of variations on the same theme. So what's happening today, right now? Well, we have this, right, I had these slides a couple weeks ago with this little nasty bugger in the corner, right? Cities and COVID, what's happening today? Mass transit use has fallen dramatically as many white collar workers are working from home, right? People like me, I can do my job remotely. I don't necessarily have to get on the blue line and go downtown. I can stay and do my work at home. Unfortunately, people like me can work from home, and many essential workers still rely on public transportation. With the decline in ridership, the revenue, right, the fare box revenue that mass transit relies on has fallen dramatically.
I think only now I'm considering getting on transit again.
Correct. I haven't been on a bus or a train in quite some time. Unfortunately, if mass transit systems, decide to reduce frequency because of the reduction in revenue, that's going to have a disproportionate impact on those essential workers, largely workers of color, who may have few other transportation options. So how is this going to play out? I don't exactly know. Right, what's the other trend that's happening? Right, for the past few years, young knowledge workers, right, people in the tech industry, perhaps, have been looking for jobs in housing in the city center rather than the suburbs. And employers have opened new offices and locations in the city center to attract these workers, right? If workers don't want to work in Schaumburg or in Buffalo Grove, they want to work in downtown Chicago, River North, or so companies have put their offices there to attract and compete for those types of workers. So putting housing and jobs in close proximity has a positive outcome, right? That's what we just talked about for the last hour, right? Mixed uses, density. With COVID, it's possible that these trends could be slow to reverse. Do I know what's going to happen with these two things in the next 6 months or a year? I don't. I'm just telling you that a lot of the developments that we just talked about may get turned in the other direction because of COVID. Time will tell. Okay, I have one more. So let's get back to more LEED specific, right? The last couple of weeks we've been talking about kind of the mechanics of the LEED rating systems. And now we're going to talk about strategies. How do we actually do the things that are indicated by these various rating systems? What are some of the strategies that one might employ as a designer or a member of a project team to actually achieve some of the goals of sustainability and green building? So we're going to talk about some strategies here. Right, just like in real estate, what are the three most important things in real estate? The three most important things are location, location, and location. Well, the same is true in green design or in sustainable design. Right, location is an extremely important aspect of sustainable design. Right, that's the decision that you make when you're deciding where to locate a project. And once you make that, you can't undo it, right? If you build a building and you want to make some changes later on, you can always go and make some tweaks to the design of your structure of your project. But you can't pick the building up and put it someplace else once it's been located there. So where a project is located and how it is developed can have multiple impacts on the resources required over the life of the building. So we'll look at 3 different characteristics here. Again, we're looking at kind of generally strategies, things that you as a designer or you as part of a design team would think about when you're deciding where to build your building, when you're looking at the LEED rating system, the LT credit category. So what are things that that come into play with location? Obviously, you have to think about the natural context, right? The climate, the soils, the sun, the wind, the vegetation, and the rain, all the climate characteristics of that particular site. Again, we're thinking about, you know, we want to build a new project. We want to build a building. We want to do something. We have to think about where we're going to put it. So we obviously have to think about its natural context. We also want to think about infrastructural context, right? I've talked about infrastructure being all the systems that support the building, right? The water, the sewer, the electricity, the transportation, all those things that aren't necessarily part of what the designer or the general contractor builds, but they're what surrounds and supports the building. Then obviously we have the social context. Is there any historic value of the site? What are the local requirements in terms of building codes, zoning? You know, what are the characteristics of the surrounding community? So what are some of the strategies that one might employ to make a greener or more sustainable building, right? To score well in the LEED LT, location and transportation credit category, right? I put my little toolbox here, right? These are things that you would have in your toolbox as a designer. Obviously, the thing we just spent the first half of the class talking about was density, right? Increase density. We're going to maximize the floor area and minimize the lot size, put as much building on that site as we possibly can, right? A smaller site means we have less impact on land. But as we saw, there's the zoning is the rules of the game. So we can only put as much building on the site as zoning will allow. We saw that some municipalities, some jurisdictions are rethinking their zoning. So number 2, choose redevelopment and infill development, right? Redevelopment or adaptive reuse, right? Renovate an existing building. That was adaptive reuse. I think we looked at that maybe in the first week. Develop sites between existing structures. That's called infill development. Remediate brownfields, right? In your reading in your textbook and your questions, we talked about gray fields and brown fields being previously developed. So we want to build on a previously developed site.
Yeah, most of the big boxes around here are that like in the inner ring suburbs.
Right. So in a big box development, right, they're probably tearing down what's there and they're building brand new. And it's a large store on a large lot with lots of parking all around it. And chances are you have trouble going to that store, you know, on your bicycle or walking, right? You almost have to get in your car. We're trying to avoid that.
Mostly it's just having to like where to park the bike.
Correct.
For
So
example,
we're going to try to,
our Riverside Mall was a EB sanitarium.
so we want to try to locate near existing infrastructure, right? We want to build on a site where the water and the sewer and the electricity already exists, right? We reduce costs for the owner who is building the project. We reduce the cost to connect up to those utilities. We also avoid urban sprawl. I think Mr. Calthorpe in the video we saw used the term sprawl, right? Sprawl means development that continues to spread outward and outward, right? We build on a green field and we are sprawling, right? We are taking farmland and woodland and turning it into development. So we want to try to do something different. We want to consolidate development. We want to avoid greenfield development, right? Greenfield is something that has not previously been built upon. So if we avoid greenfield development, there's less sprawl, we're protecting habitat, we're minimizing site disturbance. We talked about diversity of uses, right? Diversity of uses means, you know, having both residential and commercial in the same development or near each other, right? Diversity of uses means we can connect people with needed services, right? We have a residential development and maybe the small grocery store and the dry cleaner and the coffee shop are all right nearby, and we can get to those services without having to get into our car. We want to try to encourage multiple modes of transportation. Again, where we locate, if public transportation is available, then people have different options on how do they get to our development. Right, transportation. So where is the building located? What are the length and frequency of trips? What kind of technology is needed to move people and goods to and from the site? A lot of this ultimately boils down to human behavior. Again, you know, are you going to get in your car or not? Again, here's my toolbox. Right? What are some of the strategies that you might employ if you were deciding where to locate your project to make it a green or sustainable project? Right? We want to ideally choose a site adjacent to or in close proximity to mass transit. Right? We want to make it easier for people to take the bus or the train to your site. And if possible, we want to limit parking capacity. Right? We want to encourage walking and public transportation, and if possible, discourage use of the automobile. Unfortunately, sometimes the zoning will say, thou shalt have so many parking places for this size development. So zoning can work against some of our goals of green building. I'll actually have to find some examples. I think in the city of Chicago, some people have built developments along Milwaukee Avenue, and they've been able to get the city to waive the requirements for the number of parking spots that they have to have. So again, limiting parking does two things for us. Number one, we are dissuading people from driving their cars, and we're also reducing the amount of impermeable surfaces, right? We're reducing the amount of stormwater runoff, or minimizing the amount of land that has to be developed and disturbed, right? We want to encourage walking and bicycling. I don't know why, but all the LEED rating systems give points for bike racks and showers. So these are design strategies. We also have operation strategies, right? So here's how you design the building, and then the people that actually run the building might have some incentives to encourage their people to do the right thing, right? To encourage carpooling. You might have incentive programs. Maybe you have preferred parking spaces, right? The parking spaces closer to the building might be reserved for people that have a sticker, or people that say that, hey, I had 3 or 4 people coming in my car, right? As an owner of a building, maybe you can encourage alternative fuel vehicles, right? With, say, an EV charging station, EV for electric vehicle. Again, maybe if you're operating a building, right, you might be able to, your corporation might be able to encourage some things such as ride sharing or vehicle sharing. Again, here's the here's the BD&C checklist, and again, you see the points. And I said I posted this on Blackboard, so you can download the Excel file and dive into it a little bit more. But you see some of the characteristics we just talked about and the points related to them. Right, high priority site would be a brownfield redevelopment, surrounding density and diverse uses, right? Access to quality transportation, bicycle facilities, right? These are some of the things that we just talked about and how they play into the BD&C rating system. O&M, a little bit different. First of all, Susan, right, you see integrated process in BD&C, and you don't see integrated process in O&M. Obviously, the location and transportation looks a little different in O&M. It's an existing building, right? You can't choose where to put the building because the building is already there. But some of the things we talked about with some of the operational strategies we just talked about, right? Encouraging carpools and alternative fuel vehicles, right? Those are things that would be recognized in the O&M rating system, right? Those are operational things that you can do. Again, here's the LEED ND, or neighborhood development rating system. And again, this is going to look a lot like what we saw with transit-oriented development. Some of the things we just heard Peter Calthorpe talking about there, right? We want to design walkable streets, right? And remember, LEED ND is designing not a building, but a neighborhood. So this is neighborhood design, green buildings in the context of a neighborhood. So we want to design walkable streets that appeal to pedestrians, limit vehicle speeds, right? Don't have pedestrians trying to cross, 6 lanes of traffic going 45 miles an hour to get to the store. Orient toward the street, right? Bring the shops and stores up to the sidewalk. Don't have them set back. And look at the scale of the building, right? Is the scale, the height and size of the building something that's going to appeal to a pedestrian or scare them away? But again, Mr. Calthorpe just talked about amenities, trees and benches and shade, things that appeal to people, make things more walkable. Density, right? Compactness, density, more units, more square footage, more commercial square footage on the same area, right? We don't want to have gated communities, right? We want to have things that are open to everybody. Promote diverse land uses. We talked about that. Mixed use, commercial, residential, retail, public sector, kind of all in close proximity to each other. Diversity of housing types, range of household sizes, Support access to sustainable food and access to grocery stores. Again, these are things that are in the LEED ND rating system. I have to admit that I don't know this quite as well as I know some of the other rating systems, especially O&M. But I did post both the checklist and the summary of the rating systems for BD&C, O&M, and neighborhood development on Blackboard. So if you're so inclined, you can dig in and learn some more. And again, in each of these, you see it are certified silver, gold, and platinum. And that is it. Any questions? Sorry, we didn't get a chance to break you into groups and look at questions. So I will post the questions that go with LT onto Blackboard, and we'll do the same drill next week. Actually, next week we have a midterm, so we will do a lecture, and then we'll probably take the back end of the class to do a midterm. Any questions, folks?
Can you tell us anything about the midterm?
You know, I actually haven't written it yet. I'm doing things a little differently this year that I have in past years. So in past years, I could tell you what the midterm was going to look like, because it would probably look a lot like the midterm from the previous semester. What I'm thinking of is I'm going to kind of, you know, think of the first couple lectures we had. What is sustainability and global context? So probably things related to especially global climate change is probably important to make sure we have those things stuck in our mind. What is the greenhouse effect? What does that look like? So that's probably one area. And then after that, I will likely go back through these questions and find some of these lead questions and put them on there as well. So it'll be a mix of the initial couple lectures we had, and then some lead related questions. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So again, they will all be things that we've talked about, that I have lectured on. You know, again, I have to figure out the mechanics here, because I'm used to a face-to-face class where I lecture and then I let people go to sit in the studio and take the midterm on the computer. But we'll probably do the same thing. That I'll have in all likelihood, have the lecture, take a break, and then turn Blackboard on at 8:10 or 8:15, and then give you the rest of the class to take your midterm. Anything else, folks?
No, not really.
Okay. Again, I will. I'll post the lectures. I will post the links to the YouTube videos. There's some stuff up there already. Some of these additional lead materials. I also on Blackboard. I think I have under course materials, I have an extra credit category. So I posted a couple assignments there where you can earn some extra credit if you're so inclined. So take a look at that as well. And with that, I think I'm good for the evening. I hope you guys have a good rest of the evening, and we will see you next week. Again, if you have any questions, please text me or send me an email.
Thank you.
Well, you're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you much. Good night.
Good night.